It is the beginning of 2021. Yeah, we actually survived 2020. And with the addition of the new year comes a lot of new messages from you guys asking me what MMOs to start the new year off with. And that is what we're here to talk about today. Today, I am going to go ahead and list my top 10 MMORPGs. A couple of them are pay to play, a couple of them are buy to play, and the rest of them are free to play. These are MMOs that you can start right now and play until New World comes out, PSO2 New Genesis comes out, Lost Ark comes out, Ilion comes out, all later this year. Or if you're waiting a little longer, then other games like Blue Protocol or Ashes of Creation. Either way, these are 10 MMOs that you could start right this very minute. These are probably 10 of the only MMOs that I would recommend you actually play if you're looking for some of the best titles on the market. Now, real quick, before we go any further, we are going to be giving away a copy of any MMORPG you want. Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers, WoW Shadowlands, ESO Guild Wars 2's expansions, anything you want. All you need to do is be subscribed to the channel, because yeah, I can see if you're actively subscribed or not, and leave a comment in the comment section below stating why you'd like the game that you want. And that's it. The winner will be announced next month in my next top 10 video. Also, real quick, we also stream all of these MMOs and more over on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/MMObyte, if you guys want to come on by and join us as we continue delving as deep as we can into the genre, or if you'd rather accompany us in the games that we're playing through and be immortalized forever in video form on the channel. Now, let's go ahead and jump right into this. First, I am going to start this off with Final Fantasy XIV. This is and probably will always be one of my two favorite MMOs of all time. I started playing this back in probably like 2015. I started before Heavensward first came out, probably in 2.3 or 2.4. I have had an active subscription to this game since 2015. I have not had my subscription lapse thus far. Even today, to this very day, I have an active subscription to Final Fantasy XIV, even though I haven't logged in for probably 6 months or more by this point, while I'm waiting for the final patch for Shadowbringers to come out. The reason I have dedicated so much time to Final Fantasy XIV is because it is just so different, such a higher quality game than anything else I've played. The story is probably one of the deepest, richest stories that I have ever come across in an MMO to date. And there, I mean, granted, there are other games like Guild Wars 2 or Star Wars The Old Republic or The Elder Scrolls Online that all have really deep, rich stories as well. But when it comes down to it, I like the kind of anime-esque story that Final Fantasy XIV offers. Now, I know graphically, it's probably not the best looking game. I know some people think that Black Desert Online looks a lot better than Final Fantasy XIV, and you know what? A lot of Black Desert Online probably does look flashier than Final Fantasy XIV does, but at the end of the day, I really like the aesthetic look and feel that Final Fantasy XIV offers players. I like that it's not overly flashy. I like that it's not overly hypersexualized, and the combat even, I know that some people are of the impression that the combat in Final Fantasy XIV is really, really slow. And as someone who has been playing this game for 5 years now, I can attest to the fact that yes, the combat in Final Fantasy XIV is slow, at least on the way to endgame. At endgame, the combat is so complex in Savage Raids and Ultimate Raids that you actually have no idea what's going on like 85% of the time. And when you do, you're scrambling so fast, so hard to pop every ability you have to survive, to maximize your DPS, that trust me, if the combat were any faster, you wouldn't actually be able to play the game. And considering when Shadowbringers launched, this game had 1.2 million active subscribers and was more populated during Shadowbringers than at any point in the game's history, why would you not play Final Fantasy XIV, right? Now, Ilion just launched in South Korea, I think last month. They have a planned release this year in North America, and I know what you guys are thinking, but Sticks, the game isn't out in North America or Europe yet. How are we supposed to play it? And that's easy. You can either opt to play the South Korean version and, I don't know, get used to the game, power through as much of it as you can so you're ready for when it launches in North America and Europe, or you could just wait until it comes out in North America and Europe this year. The developers behind the game did note that the game was supposed to have a second quarter 2021 release, and while that is no longer confirmed, it is still very, very likely. Now, Mrs. Six and I actually had the opportunity to play through Ilion. We streamed it for quite a few hours, and we made it all the way up until level 40 something, I think, by the time we finished streaming. And let me tell you, while yes, this game is much different to what it was going to be when it was titled Ascent Infinite Realm, the game itself is still a lot of fun to play through. I was not really that big a fan of air. I know that there were certain aspects of the game, such as the ability to fly around all the different archipelagos that were located in the sky. There was aerial combat. A lot of the game itself actually took place in the sky, and honestly, the mounts that you flew on were really badly animated. The combat effects, the combat animations when you were up in the air were really badly animated. I thought the game was going to be absolutely terrible, but they completely overhauled Ilion and they made it into much more of a traditional, I don't want to say generic, but kind of generic MMO. And in my opinion, that probably works a lot better for it, because this is going to appeal to a much larger audience. Now, when Air was actually announced to be coming out, when it was in development, it was coming out as a tab target game, and its tab target combat was not very good, because this is actually from the developers that made Terra. And if you guys know Terra, you guys know that the action combat in Terra is so good. Likewise, they completely overhauled the combat in Ilion, and the combat is now very heavily action oriented. And let me tell you, the action combat in this game is really good. Not only is the combat good though, the skill effects, even the animation when you're running around, everything has been overhauled and is substantially better. Again, this feels much more like your traditional MMO, but it is set in a large sandbox world. You can access the entire world at any point, at any time. And to me, that promotes a much larger sense of exploration. And I feel like there are specific games that do this well. I'm not sure if Ilion is going to be one of those games, but there are definitely not enough MMOs out there that promote that sense of exploration and that sense of freedom. Mrs. Sticks and I have actually been streaming Guild Wars 2 over on our Twitch channel for I don't know, I think we've been streaming for 8 months by this point, and the last 4, maybe 5 months, we have been dedicating every Saturday to Guild Wars 2. And you know what? We have been enjoying it. This is probably one of the MMOs that we have actually dedicated this much time to. And we're leveled 77 as of this video goes live, almost level 80. We have been tackling this game from a free-to-play perspective, even though we have all of the expansions bought, because we want to see how the game is supposed to be played if you don't have access to gliders or mounts or any of that additional content that was introduced with those expansions. And let me tell you, it is a lot more difficult walking around the world and leveling, but it has been a lot of fun. Granted, Guild Wars 2, much like Final Fantasy XIV, utilizes segregated zones, but these zones are really large and they're filled with all of these different quests that are very unique, because unlike traditional MMOs that have you take like 5 or 6 different quests, go out and kill a bunch of monsters or loot a bunch of items and then go back to the hub where you took the quest from and then complete them, Guild Wars 2 has these little heart events that take place, which, you know, admittedly require you to either loot a bunch of items or kill a bunch of monsters, but they're different, okay? You'd understand what I mean if you actually play Guild Wars 2. They're different, but at the same time, they're kind of the same. Guild Wars 2 also has a very large emphasis on story, and if you know me, you know that if a game does not have a good story, then I'm not really going to be that interested in it. There are a very, very few exceptions to this that I think I can safely say that I enjoy without the story, one of which, or 2 of which actually I've included in this video itself. Graphically, Guild Wars 2 does look a little bit on the older side of things. Character models do look really good. The outfits you can earn in game all look great, but the game itself does look a little bit dated. But then this game did come out almost a decade ago, right? The reason I'm including Phantasy Star Online 2 in this list is because PSO2 New Genesis actually comes out in the next few months. And New Genesis has actually blown my mind with how good it looks. I actually did a video on this titled PSO2 New Genesis could be the best anime MMO of 2021. And that is because, granted, Blue Protocol is coming out in North America and Europe in 2022, but that is because this game looks so incredibly amazing. PSO2 itself is a little more linear, utilizing very instanced environments and having very small party sizes, but PSO2 New Genesis is going to completely overhaul the entirety of PSO2 with a brand new graphical engine which looks incredible, an entirely new combat system which I mean, I literally cannot state how much of an improvement this is over PSO2, and the fact that PSO2 and New Genesis are both going to be played simultaneously, concurrently with one another, as they're going to be their own unique individual game, is just mind-blowing. New Genesis, which is actually the game that I wanted to list here, is going to provide players much larger, much more expansive open areas to run around with larger groups of people, with more interactive environmental actions, and just so many new features that I am surprised that people are not more excited than they are, because I am incredibly excited, as you can probably tell. I don't know how the population is going to be, because I know that PSO2, the Steam version, has declined quite significantly over time because people were not really all that pleased by the fact that it is an instanced MMO. And I mean, you know, that completely stands to reason. There aren't really that many instanced MMOs that are really good. Like, I can list maybe 4 of them on one hand, or 2 hands if, you know, you're missing like 3 fingers. Then we have the Elder Scrolls Online. Admittedly, Mrs. Sticks and I have not dedicated enough time to this as we perhaps should have, but we have streamed multiple hours of it over on our Twitch channel, and we've also played some of it off stream as well. And while this is definitely not our favorite MMO, because there are a few of them that we enjoy more than ESO, there's no denying that ESO itself is a very high quality game. Not only does it have deep, zone-rich lore, but also has storylines that are specific to those zones that you're in. Each race starts off in their own unique area. Each race has their own unique introduction to the game. Like, the story, the lore, everything about this game is incredible, except for the combat. And I know some of you are going to be upset by me saying this, as someone who has played probably 50, maybe 60 hours of the game thus far. Quite a bit of that has been engaged in combat. I can say that I am not really that fond of the combat. I know a lot of people also mirrored that sentiment. Now, when I actually did my ESO video last year, some of you said that at endgame it's very different. I just didn't know how to play my class correctly. And you know what? There is no denying that I did not know how to play my class correctly. Not only did I play my class poorly, but playing it as poorly as I did probably gave me a bad impression, a bad perception of how the combat was, or that's what I'd think, except so many people agreed that the combat was probably one of the worst parts of the game. Regardless, the combat, which is completely action by the way, is not bad. It's just slow and it feels very clunky at times. That's the only issue I have with it. Outside of the slow, kind of clunky feeling combat at times, the combat otherwise is perfectly fine. The combat animations all look great, the skill effects all look good. Graphically, the game, like Guild Wars 2, does look a little bit dated. There are areas in the game that look absolutely stunning, but the base game itself does look a little bit dated, especially going into 2021, and especially when you see games like Black Desert, or even some of the more recent Shadowbringer zones in Final Fantasy XIV. But then ESO also doesn't try to go for that really heavily inspired fantasy look either, so it stands to reason. ESO is also one of the 5 most played MMOs on the market right now, so if you're looking for a very densely populated MMO to play, this is probably one of the few that you should look into. Then we're talking about Lost Ark. I know, Lost Ark, much like Ilion, is not currently available, at least not in North America and Europe, but it will be. Amazon Game Studios announced that this will be available this year, in 2021. Now, again, you might be thinking, but then how am I supposed to start 2021 off playing Lost Ark, right? Well, that is easy, because there are so many versions of Lost Ark that are now available. You can either play the South Korean version, you can play the Russian version, you can play the Japanese version. All 3 versions actually have English translations available that will allow you to very vaguely but still understand much of the game and its mechanics. And trust me, you are not gonna want to wait for this, because Lost Ark not only is the best isometric game that I have ever played, but it is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. It has incredible combat. Yes, the zones are kind of segregated and the environments can be a little bit repetitive, but the dungeons are absolutely insane. The kind of interactive dungeons that are present in that game, the things you could do. Now, we were streaming Lost Ark over on our Twitch channel for probably about 2, maybe 3 months, and I can safely say that I probably had more fun in Lost Ark than I did in almost any other game I've streamed thus far. And I've streamed a lot of games. Now, the story... I never thought I would actually say this about an MMO, but the story in Lost Ark was, man, there was a lot of story. Like, so much so. I think there was at one point almost an hour worth of story that you couldn't actually skip. And much like Final Fantasy XIV at the end of 2.0, I'm sure you guys can relate, was just so arduous to get to. But outside of that one experience, the story is pretty fast. It is, from what I could understand, fairly deep. There's a lot of unique characters. There's just a lot to this game. And since it just launched in Japan, its population is much higher than it has been in recent years. So if you're looking to get into any version of the game in anticipation, in preparation of playing this in North America and Europe this year, then I urge you to go ahead and probably try the Japanese version of the game, because let's be real here, they have the best dub anyway. Now we're going to talk about Black Desert Online, and I know some of you guys at this point are like, oh, screw this, and closing out of the video, because you're of the impression that Black Desert is not a very good game. But it is very good at what it does right, and what it does right is its combat, its world, its customization, and its graphics. Graphically, this is by far one of the best looking MMOs that are available right now in 2021. You can argue that point all you want, but you'd be wrong. Also, this has one of the best action combat systems in 2021. Again, you'd be welcome to argue that point, but you'd be wrong. Its world, while it is a very large world and it has a lot to it, it also feels a little bit empty at times. But then at the same time, like with the kind of freedom you're given to not only explore, but to also engage any type of monster you want to, or all of the life skills that are available, the freedom in Black Desert is probably almost unrivaled in any MMO out there. Everything about Black Desert Online looks so good on the surface, but then when you start getting into the really painful RNG upgrading systems, you get into the pay-to-win aspect of the game, and then you get into the fact that there really isn't much of a story for those of us that are actually interested in the story behind an MMO. You get left with this sense of emptiness, but I mean, that's only if you're interested in the story or you care about pay-to-win. If you don't care about either of those, then this is probably one of the best MMOs to play right now. And with how often they update this game, oh my god, like I think the Nova class just released last week or in the last couple weeks, and they just pushed out the Awakening for it. And I think just a couple months before that, another class came out, and a few months before, like, they push out new classes, new areas, new content updates so frequently. This is one of the most frequently updated MMOs that are available right now. Then we have Vindictus. I know that this is actually going to surprise some of you guys, because some of you are of the impression that the game is dead. Other guys are of the impression that it's a Nexon game. Who plays Nexon games? And you know what? You're right. Who does play Nexon games? I tend to steer clear of Nexon games because, I mean, Nexon is Nexon, and anyone that actively supports Nexon, I mean, I don't want to call you guys stupid, but now Vindictus itself is a very high quality instanced, kind of segregated hub-based MMO, and this is one of the few ones that are actually worth playing. Dungeon Fighter, Vindictus, Soul Worker, PSO2, they are probably the only hub-based MMOs that I would ever recommend to anyone. The reason I'm including Vindictus here as opposed to any of the other hub-based MMOs outside of PSO2 is because outside of PSO2, Vindictus probably has the most content available in-game. Not just that, but it also has one of the best combat systems in an MMO as well. Not only does the game employ a very impressive action combat system, but it also allows you to actively interact and engage with not only the enemies, but also the environment. As an example, if you knock over an enemy, you can pick the enemy up and you can use the enemy to smack other enemies with. Or if you knock a weapon out of an enemy's hand, you can pick up that weapon and then use it on other enemies. Or you can pick up your surroundings, that pillar over there, or the broken pillar over there, or the monster that turned to stone even. The sheer freedom you have over the combat is one of the selling points of the game. And that isn't mentioning the graphics. Like, wow, I know this game was released like a decade ago as well, but when you compare this game to games like The Elder Scrolls Online or Guild Wars 2, which were both released at roughly the same time as this, you have to think to yourself, how far ahead was Vindictus graphically at least? Because this game is gorgeous. The characters you can create, the characters you can customize, the environments that you get to explore, the instances, even the hubs that you get to run around, even the combat itself, everything looks so stunning in this game. If this were an open world MMO, I feel like this would probably have been the predecessor to Black Desert Online. But I mean, considering it's not, it's not. But if it were, man, Nexon would have actually dominated the market. Next up, we're talking about a personal favorite of both Mrs. Dix and mine, Temtem. We have actually been having a few issues getting into the game over the last 6 or so months where we lag when we're in a party together, but we're hoping that over time they manage to fix that issue, because I don't think that we have had more fun in an MMO in the last year than we have in Temtem. Not only are there just so many players running around at all periods of the day, but we actually get to play a Pokemon-esque experience together. And like, I know you can actually play that in the Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee Pokemon games, but I mean, this is completely different, and this is actually an MMO. There are completely large open areas that you can run around and explore. There are so many different Temtem that you can capture, that you can level, that you can evolve. There are tons of trainers to fight, tons of dojo leaders to engage in, tons of different strategies that you can come up with, because playing with another person like both Mrs. Dix and I do, we gotta make sure we don't have the same elemental Temtem types, because if we do, then we're going to run into issues where we have two of the same type and are therefore missing a type that would have helped us actually get ahead with the battle that we're trying to conquer. And we have actually run into this multiple times when we're fighting dojo leaders, because she likes the really powerful Temtem, she also likes the really pretty Temtem. I like the powerful Temtem, and I like the cool looking Temtem. So then we're both left with having similar type Temtems, or similar Temtems with similar strengths and weaknesses. But either way, this is an MMO that is unlike any other MMO that is currently available on the market right now. I kid you not, you have not played an MMO like Temtem until you have played Temtem. And graphically, interestingly enough, this looks really, really good. You wouldn't think so upon first inspection, but when you make it into the game, you actually think to yourself, wow, for an indie developed MMO, this is much crisper, much smoother than I would have ever thought it could be. I've never played an indie MMO where I could actually recommend it to other people. And finally, I know you guys knew this was coming, but World of Warcraft is one of my two favorite MMOs of all time. Yes, it doesn't have as deep a story as Star Wars The Old Republic or Guild Wars 2 or Final Fantasy XIV or ESO, but it probably has more lore built up over the 7 expansions it's had thus far than any other MMO to date. It's also been running longer than any of the other titans of the genre. Interestingly enough, even though there have been other tab target MMOs that have come out over the last decade, over the last 15 years of WoW being available, none have actually managed to provide a better tab target combat system than WoW has. If there is anything about WoW that players can tell you they enjoy, it is its combat. While they may have unbalanced a lot of the classes over the last, I don't know, 10 years, ever since Wrath of the Lich King ended, the combat itself has remained incredible. And graphically, I know if you're starting WoW for the first time and you pick one of the older expansions, you might get into the game and think to yourself, the game doesn't really look very good. But Mists of Pandaria, but Warlords of Draenor, Legion, Battle for Azeroth, Shadowlands, they all have amazing, progressively better looking zones. And they look incredible. I cannot deny the fact that WoW, with each expansion, provides better and better looking environments, better looking zones than almost any other game out there. And some of you guys might disagree with that, and you're more than welcome to, but to me, for someone that actually appreciates that art style, that graphical style, it looks so good. Now, to date, with the Shadowlands expansion at least, WoW still remains the most actively played MMO on the market right now. So if the graphical style of the new zones, if the combat, if the PvP, if the world, if the story does not intrigue you enough to play this game, then the fact that everyone else either has or does play this game should be reason enough for you to come on over and jump on in. And that is it. They are 10 MMORPGs that I think you should play right now to kickstart the new year, especially if you're finding yourself with nothing to play, especially if there are various games listed in this list that you haven't tried, or if you're just looking for a community to get to know, to hopefully find other people to actually enjoy playing something with. If you think that there should have been other MMOs listed here, maybe something like like Albion Online or RuneScape, then go ahead and list your list of 10 MMOs that you think you should definitely play to kickstart the new year off with, because people are scrolling through the comments right this very minute looking at your recommendations, and you might be able to help the MMO that you're playing that you love increase its population size, get new players, or you might just help someone find that new home to enjoy. Anyway guys, that is it for me. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully you have found a game worth playing in the video. Don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.
Someday soon, I'm gonna make it.